I moved to the suburbs for 3 reasons: a gigabit internet connection, a garage I could actually park a car in, and a yard big enough for my dog, if I ever got a dog, and my landlord, a faceless corporation in Delaware, ever decided to bless the union. What I got instead was Maple Creek Estates, a neighborhood so committed to beige it was less a color palette and more a desperate cry for help. And its high priestess, the self-appointed guardian of its oatmeal-hued soul, was Brenda. And Brenda, at this particular moment, was marching across my perfectly acceptable, if not golf course green, lawn with the grim determination of a Terminator unit whose mission was to eliminate all joy. I was on a stepladder, a good 8 feet up, putting the finishing touches on my baby. The Tempest X 5000 personal weather station. It was a glorious piece of tech, a sleek column of white composite metal bristling with scientific-looking doodads, anemometers to measure wind speed, a hygrometer for humidity, a barometer that could sense a butterfly sneezing a county over, and a whole suite of other sensors that would feed glorious, beautiful data directly to my triple-monitor setup inside. I was in a state of pure, unadulterated nerd bliss, tightening the final bolt on the wind vane. Alexander. The voice cut through the gentle suburban breeze like a shard of glass. It wasn't a question. It was a summons. I looked down. There she was, Brenda in all her glory. 50-something, clad in a beige pantsuit that perfectly matched the house behind her, holding a thick, 3-ring binder to her chest like a shield. Her hair was a helmet of blonde spray, seemingly immovable even in the rising wind. "Brenda," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "Beautiful day, isn't it? A little breezy, barometric pressure's starting to drop, though. I'm tracking a low-pressure system moving in from the west." I gestured grandly at the Tempest X. She didn't look at it. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed into disapproving slits. "We need to have a discussion about that," she said, finally pointing at my beautiful creation with her pen. She wielded it like a weapon, and I got the distinct impression she used it to stab the hopes and dreams of residents on a regular basis. "This?" I patted the pole. "This is the Tempest X 5000. State-of-the-art. It's a personal weather station. It provides hyper-local, real-time data on everything from wind speed and rainfall to lightning strike proximity. It's fantastic." "It's an unapproved exterior modification," she countered, her voice flat and devoid of any emotion save for a deep, abiding certainty in her own correctness. She opened the binder. The rustle of the plastic-sleeved pages sent a shiver down my spine. It was the sound of bureaucratic doom. "Come on, Brenda, it's a poll, it's tasteful," I argued, already knowing it was a lost cause. "It's even white. It coordinates with the trim on my house, see? Aesthetically pleasing." "Section 4, subsection C, paragraph 2, she intoned, reading from the holy text. "All exterior attachments, including but not limited to flagpoles, satellite dishes, and other atmospheric measuring contraptions, must be submitted for review and receive written approval from the Architectural Review Committee prior to installation." "And let me guess," I said, descending the ladder with a sigh. "You're the Architectural Review Committee?" "I am its president," she said with a hint of pride. "And I can tell you, this was never submitted for review." "Because I just bought it." "Look," I tried a different tack, the one where I pretend we're both reasonable people living in a society. "Forget aesthetics for a second. This is a safety device. You know how the weather's been in North Texas lately? This thing can detect the specific signature of a mesocyclone forming from 10 miles out. It's like having our own personal early warning system for tornadoes. It could give us precious minutes to take cover. I was even planning on creating a public web page with the live data feed for the whole neighborhood, for free, a community service." I smiled. hoping my civic-minded generosity would melt her cold, rule-obsessed heart. It did not. "The fire department provides for our safety, Alexander," she said dismissively. This contraption is an eyesore. It disrupts the harmonious visual landscape of Maple Creek Estates. Our property values are dependent on maintaining a consistent and pleasing aesthetic." "My little weather station is going to tank the housing market? Brenda, Gary across the street has a flock of plastic pink flamingos migrating across his lawn. What about that?" "The flamingo flock was approved in 2017 after a lengthy review process," she shot back without missing a beat. "They are considered lawn art. That is a utility pole with a propeller." I had to hand it to her. She was an artist of the absurd, a master of the meaningless distinction. "You have 24 hours to remove it," she declared, snapping her binder shut with a sound like a guillotine. "If it is still visible from the street by this time tomorrow, an official violation notice will be issued. Have a pleasant day." She pivoted on her sensible shoes and marched back toward her own beige fortress, leaving me standing in the shadow of my magnificent and apparently illegal weather station. The wind picked up, spinning the anemometer faster and faster. The Tempest X was telling me a storm was coming. It was more right than it knew. Fighting an HOA is like arguing with a chatbot that has been programmed with the tax code and the collected works of Franz Kafka. It's a soul-crushing exercise in futility. The CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, were a 200-page document of pure, unadulterated evil, written in a dead language called legalese, designed to be both completely comprehensive and utterly incomprehensible at the same time. I sat in my home office, the glow of my 3 monitors illuminating my determined scowl. On the left screen, the live data from the Tempest X streamed in beautiful, colorful graphs. The wind speed was gusting over 20 miles per hour, and the pressure was on a steady, downward trend. On the right screen was the National Weather Service radar, showing a massive system of storms blooming over West Texas and barreling our way. And in the center, the enemy. Maple_Creek_Estates _CCCRs _amended_2 022 _final _V4.pdf. My eyes scanned the document, searching for a chink in the armor. Lawn maintenance standards, trash receptacle placement, holiday decoration timelines. It was a totalitarian manifesto for suburban living. Then, I found it. A little ray of hope in a sea of beige despair. Section 7, Paragraph FF, Permissible Attachments. It listed things like security cameras and discrete accessibility ramps. And there, buried in a sub-clause, were the magic words: "Other equipment deemed necessary for the safety and security of the resident." Deemed necessary. That was my loophole. Who did the deeming? It was vague. I could make that work. I cracked my knuckles and began to compose an email. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive corporate speak. To arc_committee@maplecreekhoa.com. From alex.henderson@email.com. Subject: Your verbal warning of June 17, 2025 regarding exterior attachment. Dear Architectural Review Committee, this email is to formally appeal the verbal warning issued to me on this date regarding the installation of my personal weather station at 124 Willow Lane. While I understand and appreciate the committee's commitment to maintaining the aesthetic integrity of our beautiful community, I must respectfully argue that this equipment falls under the permissible attachments outlined in Section 7, Paragraph F of the CC&Rs. Given the increasing frequency and severity of adverse weather events in our region, including tornadic systems, real-time hyperlocal atmospheric data constitutes a critical safety asset. The Tempest X5000 is not a mere contraption, but a sophisticated piece of safety equipment that can provide advance warning beyond what is offered by municipal-level alerts. Therefore, I deem it necessary for my safety and, by extension, the safety of my immediate neighbors. I trust the committee will agree that the safety of our residents is a higher priority than any perceived disruption to the harmonious visual landscape. Sincerely, Alex Henderson, a safety-conscious resident. I read it over twice, savoring the slightly condescending tone. It was perfect. Before hitting send, I shot a text to my next-door neighbor, Dave. He was a decent guy, a corporate middle manager who just wanted to grill burgers and watch football in peace. His defining characteristic was a deep-seated fear of getting on Brenda's bad side. Alex, you are not going to believe this. Brenda just tried to shut down my weather station. A reply came back instantly. Dave, oh man, not the architectural committee. She sent me a violation warning last spring because my garden gnome's hat was a non-conforming shade of primary red. I had to repaint it, heritage red. Alex, you're kidding me. Dave, I wish I were. What did you do? Alex, I'm fighting back. I sent an email arguing it's safety equipment. You think she'll buy it? There was a long pause. Dave. Dude. She would write up a fire extinguisher if it clashed with the drapes. You're a braver man than I. Good luck, you're gonna need it. I took a deep breath and hit send on the email. It felt like launching a digital torpedo into the heart of the beast. I leaned back, a small smile on my face. Then I glanced at the weather radar. The splotches of green and yellow from an hour ago were now a solid, angry mass of orange and red. The National Weather Service had just issued a tornado watch for our entire county, effective until 10 p.m. My little digital battle was about to get a very real, very wet, and very windy backdrop. The next morning, I woke up to a sky the color of a faded bruise. The air was thick, humid, and still, holding a tense, pregnant silence. It was the kind of weather that made the hair on your arms stand up. The local news was on, and the meteorologist, a man with alarmingly white teeth and a somber expression, was pointing at a map that was almost entirely red. Folks, I can't stress this enough, he said, his voice grave. This is a dangerous setup. We have a potent cold front colliding with a warm, unstable air mass. The conditions are ripe for severe thunderstorms, large hail, damaging straight-line winds, and yes, the potential for strong, isolated tornadoes. Please have a plan. Know where you'll go if a warning is issued for your area. I was sipping my coffee, feeling a smug sense of validation. See? I thought, directing my mental energy at Brenda's house across the street. This is why we need the Tempest X. The doorbell rang. It was the short, sharp, impatient chime of someone who believed the world should operate on their schedule. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. I opened the door to find Brenda standing on my porch, holding a single, crisp sheet of paper between her thumb and forefinger, as if it were contaminated. Good morning, Brenda, I said. Did you get my email? I did, she said, her voice colder than the cold front on the weather map. Your appeal has been reviewed and denied by the committee. I couldn't help myself. Wow, that was fast. Did you guys have an emergency session? Was there coffee and donuts? Or did you just have a very serious meeting with yourself in the mirror this morning? My sarcasm bounced off her impenetrable shield of self-importance. The committee finds that personal weather stations do not constitute safety equipment under the meaning of the bylaws. The fire department provides safety. The National Weather Service provides warnings. You provide an eyesore. She held out the paper. It was an official violation notice. A $50 fine, payable to the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association. The fine is $50, she stated, as if reading my mind. It will double to $100 for every 48-hour period the violation remains. The notice is on your door. Before I could take it from her, she produced a small roll of Scotch tape from her pocket. She came prepared, I'll give her that, and deliberately, methodically, taped the notice to the center of my front door. It was the suburban equivalent of being served with a black spot, a public shaming for all my beige-loving neighbors to see. "Have a nice day, Alexander." She turned and walked away. As she did, I saw a flicker of movement across the street. It was Gary, the neighborhood's resident doomsday prepper. Gary's lawn was immaculate, his hedges perfectly trimmed, but his garage, I'd heard, was a fortress of MREs, water purifiers, and shortwave radios. He was in his front yard, methodically screwing heavy-duty storm shutters onto his windows. He caught my eye, looked at the violation notice on my door, looked at my weather station, and then gave me a slow, knowing nod. It wasn't a friendly nod. It was a grim, almost pitying nod. The nod of a man who knew he was about to be proven right about everything. The first domino had fallen. The conflict was no longer a matter of opinion. It was a matter of money. And looking at the sickly, yellow-green sky, I had a sinking feeling that $50 was going to be the least of my problems. Cornered, digitally exiled from the official neighborhood channels, and now $50 poorer, I did what any modern man does when faced with gross injustice. I took to social media. Not the official, Brenda-controlled Facebook page, but the unofficial one. The real Maple Creek Estates Community Forum, a place for gossip, contractor complaints, and general anti-HOA sentiment. It was my last bastion of hope. I took a photo of the violation notice taped to my door, another of the Tempest X standing proudly against the ominous sky, and composed my manifesto. Alex Henderson posted, "Hey neighbors, just wanted to share a heartwarming story about our HOA in action. While the National Weather Service is telling us to prepare for potentially life-threatening tornadoes today, our esteemed Architectural Review Committee is busy fining me for installing a personal weather station, a device that could give us all a few extra minutes of warning. Here's the violation notice. The Scotch tape was a lovely personal touch from Brenda. And here's the eyesore in question. Just wanted to make sure everyone knows where our HOA fees are being spent. Stay safe today, everyone." I even included a link to the public data feed I'd created. Let the people see the truth. Let them see the plunging barometric pressure for themselves. The post went off like a grenade. Within minutes, the likes and comments started pouring in. Dave was first, of course. Dave Chen. "That's insane, Alex. Looks cool to me." Then came the others. A woman named Sharon commented. Sharon P. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Last month they sent me a letter about my mailbox being 2 inches too far from the curb." A man named Mike added, Mike R. "Brenda is out of control. We need to vote her out in the next election." I felt a surge of triumph. The revolution was beginning. The people were with me. But then, the tide turned. Brenda's loyalists, the Beige Guard, entered the fray. Barbara L. "The rules are the rules for a reason, Alex. They protect our property values. If you don't like them, you shouldn't have moved here." Tom H. "I don't want to look at your science experiment every time I drive by. Take it down. It's not that hard." The comments devolved into a vicious back and forth, a digital civil war between the pro-Flamingo and anti-Gnome factions. My attempt at rallying the community had turned into a dumpster fire. And then, the final boss appeared. Brenda herself. She didn't use her personal account, of course. She used the official Maple Creek HOA persona, a faceless entity of pure authority, Maple Creek. HOA. This forum is not the appropriate venue for airing personal grievances or for circumventing the established architectural review process. Mr. Henderson has been made aware of the bylaws he agreed to upon purchasing his home. The violation stands. Please be advised that per the community's code of conduct, public disparagement of the board or its members is also a violation. 5 minutes later, my post vanished. A message popped up on my screen. You have been blocked from posting in this group by an administrator. And just like that, I was digitally exiled. I had become a non-person in the People's Republic of Maple Creek. My only crime was wanting to know if it was going to rain. I stared at the blank screen, the wind rattling my office window. The storm outside was getting closer, and the storm inside the neighborhood had just reached its petty, ridiculous climax. I was alone in this fight. It was just after 2 p.m. when the flashing lights painted my living room walls in strobing blues and reds. I looked out the window to see a police cruiser parked at my curb. My heart hammered in my chest. Did she really? Oh, she really did. I opened the front door to find 2 officers walking up my driveway. The older one had a thick mustache and an expression of profound, bone-deep weariness, as if he'd seen every stupid thing humanity had to offer, and this was just the latest chapter. The younger one was sharp, by the book, but had the same look of vague disappointment in his eyes. "Afternoon, sir," the older one said. His name tag read Miller. "We got a call about a disturbance?" He squinted at his little notepad. "Something about an unauthorized broadcast tower being erected?" I burst out laughing, a short, sharp, hysterical sound. "A broadcast tower? You've got to be kidding me. It's a weather station. It's for tracking the weather. Let me guess. The call came from a woman named Brenda across the street?" Officer Miller's shoulders slumped a fraction of an inch, a barely perceptible admission of defeat. "Ma'am, across the street calls us about once a week. Last Tuesday it was a suspiciously loitering garden flamingo in the Petersons' yard, on a windy day. So, what's the deal with the, He glanced at his notes again. Atmospheric measuring contraption." He actually winked. Brenda must have read him my email verbatim. The traitor. I explained the whole sordid tale, from the initial installation to the violation notice to my exile from the Facebook group. The younger officer, Rodriguez, remained stoic, but Miller listened with the patience of a saint, nodding along. "Look, son," Miller said when I was done, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Here's the deal. This is a civil matter. It's between you and your HOA, which means it's a giant pain in the neck for everyone involved, especially us. Technically, that thing is on your property. We can't make you take it down." I felt a sliver of hope. But, he continued, crushing that hope into a fine powder, she's claiming you're refusing to comply with the bylaws of the community, which you agreed to when you bought the house. That's a breach of a civil contract. She can continue to fine you, put a lien on your house, and eventually take you to small claims court, where a judge who is just as tired as I am will probably tell you to just take the damn thing down. Trust me, I've seen this exact movie a dozen times. The HOA always wins. I gestured wildly at the sky, which was now the color of a nasty mood ring, all churning purples and sickly greens. The wind was whipping the trees into a frenzy. "And what about that? There's a tornado watch on. That thing," I pointed at the Tempest X, "is the only thing in this whole neighborhood that can give us a truly accurate, up-to-the-second warning if something is coming right for us." Miller looked at the sky. He looked at Brenda's house, where I could just make out her silhouette in the window, watching us. He looked back at me. "My advice?" he said, stepping a little closer. "Official advice is to consult the bylaws and an attorney. Unofficial, off-the-record advice from a guy who just wants to finish his shift and go home. For your own sanity, just take it down. You can't win this battle. Don't let her have the satisfaction of dragging you through the mud for months. The weather looks nasty. You don't need this headache on top of it." The logic was infuriating and impeccable. Brenda was watching from her window, arms crossed, a smug, triumphant look on her face that was visible even from 50 yards away. The police weren't here to help me. They were here to manage the inevitable, messy fallout of Brenda's personal crusade. I was out of options. And so I surrendered. With the sky turning the color of a day-old bruise and the wind starting to speak in complete sentences, I went to dismantle the one thing that could tell me exactly what was coming. It was the dumbest, most infuriatingly symbolic act of capitulation I'd ever performed. I hauled the aluminum ladder out of the garage, its legs sinking slightly into the soft, rain-dampened lawn. Each gust of wind threatened to turn it into a kite, with me attached. I could feel Brenda's eyes on me from her living room window. I could feel Dave's, too, peeking nervously through his blinds. One was a look of triumph, the other of pity. I hated them both. I climbed the ladder, the metal rungs cold under my hands. The wind howled in my ears, a mournful, warning sound. I pulled out my wrench and got to work on the bolts. My phone, snug in my pocket, buzzed. I pulled it out, one hand gripping the ladder for dear life. It was a notification from the Tempest X app. Alert. Rapid pressure drop detected, minus 6.4 MB in 15 minutes. Alert. Significant wind shear detected. I stared at the screen. The data stream was a beautiful, terrifying graph of impending doom. The wind direction was shifting violently, the speed jumping from 20 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour in a matter of seconds. It was a classic textbook signature. Rotation. Somewhere nearby, the air was starting to twist. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Just leave it up!" a voice in my head screamed. "What are they going to do? Fine you more?" But my rational brain, conditioned by years of avoiding trouble, took over. Miller's weary face flashed in my mind. The endless letters, the fines, the court dates, the sheer, grinding misery of it all. I put the phone back in my pocket and put the wrench to the last bolt. It came free with a groan. I held the entire weather station assembly in my hands. It felt surprisingly heavy, weighted with my defeat. I carefully disconnected the power and data cable from the base. I glanced at my phone again. The app screen went blank, then displayed a simple, heartbreaking message in gray text. Signal lost. The graphs were gone. The numbers were gone. The warnings were gone. The moment it went dark, a wave of blind panic washed over me. It was like closing your eyes in the middle of a knife fight. I was completely, totally in the dark, and I had done it to myself. I descended the ladder and placed the Tempest X gently on the grass, like it was a fallen soldier. I looked across at Brenda's house. She gave a single, triumphant nod, a clear and final declaration of her victory. Then, satisfied that the beige harmony of the neighborhood had been restored, she turned from the window and disappeared into the depths of her house. I stood there for a moment, defeated, the wind whipping my hair around my face. Then the world went eerily quiet. The constant howling wind just stopped. It was a heavy, oppressive, vacuum-like silence. The birds were gone. The leaves on the trees were unnervingly still. It was the sound of the world holding its breath before the scream. Thwack. A single piece of hail, the size of a golf ball, cratered the asphalt of the driveway next to me. Then another hit the roof of my car with a sickening crunch. And then it began. A low, rising moan started, seeming to come from all directions at once. It wasn't the wind. It was something deeper, more mechanical. It built and built, climbing in pitch until it became a full-throated, soul-shattering wail that vibrated in my bones. The city's tornado sirens. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for my phone. A red banner screamed across the screen, a push alert from the National Weather Service. Tornado warning for your area. Confirmed tornado on the ground. Seek shelter immediately. I looked at my watch. I looked at the dead, useless weather station at my feet. I looked up at the sky. Brenda had gotten her wish. My weather station was banned. It had been offline for less than 5 minutes. And now the Sirens were singing our song. Pure adrenaline-fueled panic is a remarkable thing. It strips away all the complex layers of modern human thought and leaves you with the raw, primal instincts of a cornered animal. My only instinct was inside. In a move that made no logical sense, I scooped up the useless Tempest X from the grass and sprinted for the front door, fumbling with the keys as the hail began to fall in earnest, a furious drumming that sounded like 1,000 angry drummers beating on the roof. I slammed the door shut just as a window in the living room exploded inward, spraying glass across the hardwood floor. The TV, still on the news channel, flickered. The meteorologist's face was grim. He was no longer pointing at a map of the county. He was zoomed in on a single, terrifying shape on the radar. A perfect hook echo, a swirling vortex of red and purple. And the little location marker for Maple Creek Estates was sitting directly in its path. If you are in the Maple Creek area, I repeat, this is a confirmed, large, and extremely dangerous tornado on the ground. His voice was strained, cracking with urgency. This is not a drill. This is a life-threatening situation. Take cover immediately in an interior room, a basement, a closet. Get as low as you can. Basement? This was Texas. We didn't have basements. We had decorative storm cellars for people with more money than sense. My best option was the guest bathroom. It was tiny, windowless, and nestled in the very center of the house. My brain kicked into survival mode. Mattress, laptop, whiskey, the essentials. I wrestled the queen-sized mattress from the guest bed, dragging it down the short hallway. I snatched my laptop off my desk, a reflex born of 1,000 IT emergencies, and grabbed the half-full bottle of expensive bourbon I'd been saving. Priorities. I dove into the bathroom, dragging the mattress in after me. I threw my laptop, the whiskey, and the ridiculously out-of-place weather station into the cast-iron bathtub, then heaved the mattress on top of it all, creating a makeshift cave. I squeezed myself in beside them and pulled the shower curtain closed. And then the sound hit. You hear people say it sounds like a freight train. It does. But they leave out the part where the train is filled with gravel and glass and is derailing inside your living room at 1,000 miles per hour. It started as a low rumble and escalated into a deafening, all-consuming roar that wasn't a sound you heard with your ears, but one you felt in your teeth. The house began to pop and groan, the sounds of a structure under an impossible strain. The pipes moaned, a high-pitched shriek of tortured metal. It felt like some giant, mythological beast had picked up the house and was shaking it violently, trying to get at the gooey center, which was me. The lights flickered once, twice, and died, plunging me into absolute darkness, save for the emergency alerts still lighting up my phone screen. The pressure change was immense. My ears popped so hard it felt like they were bleeding. I could hear glass shattering. Not just one window, but all of them, all at once. I heard the sickening crack and splinter of 2x4s, the wooden skeleton of my home snapping like twigs. Then came the worst sound, a colossal, grinding crunch from above, followed by a terrifying, high-pitched shearing noise. It was the sound of the roof being peeled open like a tin can. Insulation, drywall dust, and rain began to pour down on the mattress protecting me. The roar was directly on top of me now, a physical presence that vibrated through the tub and into my very soul. It lasted for maybe 45 seconds. It felt like a lifetime, and then as suddenly as it began, it was over. The roar receded, replaced by an eerie, profound silence. A silence even more absolute than the one before the sirens. It was broken only by the gentle, almost peaceful sound of rain falling directly into what used to be my house. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just lay there in my bathtub coffin, listening to the rain and the frantic beating of my own heart. I was alive. My house, I suspected, was not. With a groan, I pushed the heavy, debris-covered mattress off of me. A shower of insulation, plaster, and dead leaves rained down. I looked up. Where the ceiling of the bathroom should have been, I saw the churning, bruised purple sky. The rain fell on my face. I climbed out of the tub, my legs shaking. The bathroom door was gone, ripped from its hinges. I stepped into the hallway and stopped dead. The hallway ended about 5 feet from the bathroom, opening into a vista of pure destruction. My living room, my kitchen, my office, they were simply gone. The entire front half of my house had been erased. A single, pathetic-looking wall remained, the one where my TV had been mounted. The TV was gone too. I stumbled through the wreckage, my bare feet crunching on glass and splintered wood, toward the gaping hole where my front door used to be. I stepped out onto what was once my porch and stared. Apocalypse. That was the only word for it. It looked like a bomb had gone off. My quiet, beige, meticulously manicured street was a war zone. Houses were missing roofs, walls, entire second stories. Cars were overturned, their windows shattered. The proud oak trees that had lined the street for 50 years were stripped bare, twisted into grotesque skeletal shapes. My eyes found Dave's house next door. It was heavily damaged, the garage door buckled inward and the roof looking like a giant had taken a bite out of it. But it was standing. I saw him emerge from his front door, his face pale with shock. He saw me, and his eyes widened. We shared a look that needed no words, a silent, stunned acknowledgement that we had both just survived the unthinkable. "Alex?" he yelled, his voice hoarse. "You're okay, my God, my garage is in my living room." Before I could answer, another figure emerged from the house across the street. Gary, the prepper. His house, with its storm shutters and reinforced garage door, was virtually untouched. A few missing shingles, maybe. He was already outside, calmly checking a hand-crank radio and surveying the damage with a grim, practiced eye. He looked at me, then at Dave, and gave us that same grim "I told you so" nod from earlier. "EF3 at least," he announced to the street, his voice carrying in the strange post-storm quiet. "Maybe a low-end EF4. The barometric pressure drop on my instruments was significant." He looked pointedly at the empty spot on my lawn where the Tempest X had stood, then at the mangled heap of my house. The message was clear. My gaze was then drawn further down the street, to Brenda's house, or what was left of it. It had taken a direct, catastrophic hit. The entire second floor had been sheared off, leaving only the first floor, exposed to the elements like a grim dollhouse. Her perfectly curated lawn was a junkyard of splintered wood, insulation, and the debris from a dozen other homes. Her binder of rules, her weapon, and her shield was nowhere in sight. Then I saw movement. A figure, small and dazed, stumbled out of the wreckage of her front door. It was Brenda. She was covered in a thick layer of white dust. Her pantsuit was torn, and a thin trickle of blood ran from a cut on her forehead. She looked utterly broken, staring at the ruin of her home, her kingdom. She saw me. Our eyes met across the debris-strewn street. The 50 yards between our houses felt like a mile-wide canyon. I waited for the surge of triumph, the bitter taste of vindication, the overwhelming urge to scream, "I told you so!" at the top of my lungs. But it never came. Looking at her, I felt nothing of the sort. There was no triumph, only a hollow, aching pity. In that moment, she wasn't HOA Karen. She wasn't the president of the Architectural Review Committee. She wasn't the woman who had fined me and called the cops on me over a piece of plastic and metal. She was just a terrified, shattered woman who had lost everything. We both were. The tornado was the great equalizer. It didn't give a damn about Section 4, subsection C. It didn't care about property values or aesthetic harmony. It had torn through our petty, ordered world and left behind a raw, terrifying, and strangely honest reality. And in that reality, we were just neighbors, survivors. The day after the storm was a symphony of chaos. The air, once filled with the roar of the wind, was now filled with the sound of chainsaws, the beep, beep, beep of heavy machinery, and the endless chirping chorus of insurance adjusters' cell phones. News vans with satellite dishes sprouting from their roofs lined the entrance to the neighborhood, their reporters speaking in hushed, dramatic tones about the resilience of the human spirit. And then came the vultures. They arrived in flashy pickup trucks with magnetic logos slapped on the doors, logos that always seemed to involve a swooping eagle or a muscular arm holding a hammer. They walked through the debris with clipboards and predatory smiles, offering solace and salvation in the form of a contract with a lot of fine print. A particularly slick specimen in a tight-fitting polo shirt and wraparound sunglasses pulled his F-350 with a logo that looked like a tornado chasing a dollar sign right onto my dead lawn. "Storm Chaser Steve," he said, extending a hand. His handshake was too firm. "Terrible tragedy, just terrible. I saw the damage to your roof, and my crew is right around the corner. We can get a tarp on that for you right now. No money down. We deal with the insurance company directly. You don't have to worry about a thing." He smelled of cheap cologne and opportunism. He handed me a tablet with a digital contract already pulled up. I scrolled through it. Assignment of benefits, power of attorney, non-refundable deposit. It was a masterpiece of legal predation. "No thanks," I said, handing it back. "I think I'm good." He shrugged, his smile never faltering. "Suit yourself? Offer's only good for today. Your neighbors are signing up left and right." He gestured down the street, then hopped back in his truck and sped off toward his next target. I saw Dave talking to another contractor, a woman this time. Her truck was a beat-up 10-year-old Ford, its sides scuffed and dented. She wasn't smiling. She was listening intently as Dave pointed at his damaged garage, her expression serious, her head nodding. I wandered over after she was done with Dave. Her name was Maria. She had kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor that I immediately trusted. "What do you think?" I asked, gesturing at the pile of rubble that was once my home. She walked the perimeter, kicking at a splintered stud, peering at the cracked foundation. She didn't try to sell me anything. "This is a teardown," she said, her voice blunt but not unkind. "Don't let anyone tell you different. Don't let some storm chaser from out of state convince you they can patch it up. You start trying to fix this, you'll be chasing leaks and electrical problems for the next 20 years. It's compromised." She looked me square in the eye. "Here's what you do. Document everything. Take 1,000 photos. Fight your insurance company for full replacement value, not actual cash value. And find a good local builder for the rebuild. I'm just a roofer, and son, you need a hell of a lot more than a roof." It was the most honest and helpful advice I'd received in 48 hours. I thanked her profusely. As she left, my eyes fell on a glint of white metal in the wreckage of my garage. I walked over and pulled it out. It was the Tempest X5000. The pole was bent and the wind cups were gone, but the main sensor unit was intact, albeit with a nasty dent on one side. I held it in my hands, this absurd catalyst for the whole ridiculous drama. A familiar police cruiser, Miller and Rodriguez's, crawled down the debris-choked street. Miller was behind the wheel. He saw me standing there, holding the battered weather station in the ruins of my house. He slowed the car to a stop. He didn't say a word. He just gave me a long, weary, and deeply ironic look that said everything. It said, "You see what I mean?" It said, "Was it worth it?" It said, "This whole town is crazy." He shook his head slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the cosmic joke we were all living in, and drove on. A few days later, the initial shock had worn off, replaced by the grim, logistical reality of demolition and insurance claims. The neighborhood was a patchwork of blue-tarped roofs and overflowing dumpsters. I was sitting on a plastic cooler on my ruined lawn, engaged in a deeply unsatisfying phone call with an insurance adjuster who seemed to believe a tornado was an act of God my policy didn't fully cover. "No, I understand what an act of God is," I was saying, pinching the bridge of my nose. "But I'm pretty sure God doesn't have a deductible. Can you just tell me if—" I saw her approaching out of the corner of my eye. It was Brenda. She wasn't the pristine, intimidating HOA president anymore. She was just another displaced resident, wearing sweatpants and a faded t-shirt with the logo of some 5K fun run on it. She looked tired. She looked older. I ended my call. She wandered over, not stopping in front of me, but beside me, as we both stared at the flattened landscape of our lives. We stood in silence for a full minute, the only sound the distant whine of a chainsaw. "The sirens," she said finally, her voice quiet and hollow. She didn't look at me. "They didn't go off until it was right on top of us. There was no time." I nodded, my throat tight. "I know." She took a shaky breath. "That thing," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your machine, your weather station. Would it have told us sooner?" This was it. The moment I had dreamed of. My chance to be smug, to be right, to rub her face in the consequences of her own petty tyranny. I could have said, "Yes, Brenda, it would have, but you were too busy worrying about the harmonious visual landscape." I could have destroyed her with a single, vindictive sentence, but looking at her sad, defeated profile, at the way her hands trembled slightly, I couldn't. The anger was gone, washed away by the storm. I thought for a moment, remembering the data on my phone just before I'd unplugged it, the pressure drop, the wind shear. "Yeah," I said, my voice as quiet as hers. It would have. The data showed rotation developing in the storm cell about 10 minutes before the sirens went off. It wouldn't have been a huge amount of time, but it probably would have given us an extra 5 or 6 minutes of real definite warning. She just nodded, absorbing this information. The weight of that lost 5 minutes hung in the air between us, thicker than the humid Texas air. It was a shared regret. It was her apology. It was my forgiveness. 5 minutes, she murmured to herself. 5 minutes. What can you do in 5 minutes? You can get your kids from the living room to the closet. You can grab the photo albums. You can get the cat in the carrier and your dog on a leash. You can call your parents. You can save a life. In a tornado, 5 minutes is a lifetime, and we had lost it over a fight about aesthetics. "They're dissolving the Architectural Review Committee," she said, finally looking at me. "For now, anyway. The board had an emergency meeting. No one has the energy to care about the color of anyone's mailbox right now." She offered a small, sad smile. "I'm sorry, Alex, for everything." "Me too, Brenda," I said. And I meant it. And that was it. No shouting, no grand victory lap. Just two survivors sitting on the ruins of their perfectly manicured, beige-colored world. The tornado took our houses, but it blew away the nonsense. It scoured away the petty rules and the artificial divisions and left behind something cleaner, something more real. I looked down at the dented Tempest X 5000 sitting in the grass beside my cooler, a symbol of my defeat, and now a symbol of my resolve. I'm going to rebuild. Right here. And the first thing I'm going to install, probably before the foundation is even poured, is the biggest, baddest, most un-HOA approved weather station you have ever seen. A Tempest X 9000 maybe, with its own solar panel and a backup battery. And this time everyone's getting the password.